Mr. Mayor, you're muted.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. It's Mayor Stuart Houston from the City of Spruce Grove. Thank you, Councillor Grilke, for reminding me that I was muted. We are live now, and we are about to commence our regular council meeting for May 25th, 2020. I want to welcome everybody on behalf of all of us on our virtual meeting. And I would like to start off with calling the meeting to order. And I would also ask for an adoption of the agenda from one of my colleagues.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, moved by Councillor Roth for the adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda from council? Councillor Grilke?
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to give a quick update for businesses in the area, if I could.
For businesses in the area?
Yeah,
Okay,
I don't know if that's a presentation or just a statement and update.
we'll put that under 8A, under councillor statements and updates.
Thank you.
Okay, that's under 8A. Anything else? Councillor Roth, did you have something?
No, I have nothing.
Okay. Anything further? Seeing none. Mr. Farbrother, anything to add or any changes or additions on the agenda from administration?
Nothing to change, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll call the question on the motion for the adoption of the agenda. Okay, thank you very much. That's been carried. Could I get a motion, please, for the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that recommendations contained in the following reports be approved. Item 3A, May 11th, 2020, regular council meeting minutes, and May 19th, 2020, committee of the whole meeting minutes. Item 9A, 2020 first quarter financial statements. Item 12A, various board and committee meeting minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Those three items. Is that okay with everybody? Does anybody want any of those pulled up off the consent agenda? Thank you very much, Councillor Oldham. Seeing nothing, I will call the question on the motion for the adoption of the consent agenda, or the motion. Thank you. That's been carried. Okay, could I get, we're getting ready to do a virtual public hearing. So I'd like to ask at this time if Councillor Acker could read the preamble prior to the public hearing with an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Public hearings are convened in accordance with the Municipal Government Act of Alberta and have two purposes. The first is to provide stakeholders and community members with an opportunity to make submissions to council about the proposed bylaw. The second is to allow council to gather pertinent information on the proposed bylaw prior to making a decision. This is the public's last opportunity to comment on the proposed bylaw, as council is unable to receive further submissions after a public hearing is closed. Is that the statement?
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to open the public hearing on C1096-19. It's a land use bylaw amendment. It's a text amendment for R2 district, and it's under fee simple row housing. And I would ask our clerk if she could please provide a review of the hearing procedures.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this public hearing is being held in accordance with the meeting procedures COVID-19 suppression regulation and city bylaw C-1120-20. Those interested in making a submission during the hearing may do so by sending an email to cityclerk@sprucegrove.org. Email submissions will be accepted until the close of the hearing. Those requesting to make a verbal submission were required to register by noon today. The process for the hearing will be as follows. Administration will make a presentation first. Council will then hear from those who have pre-registered to speak. The clerk will then read into the record any written submissions that were received by email. If deemed necessary, the hearing will temporarily adjourn to allow council to review the material. Council will be given the opportunity to ask clarifying questions of administration. And finally, the city clerk will then read into the record any additional written submissions received by email. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, I would like to ask administration to provide their presentation, and please introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Pankaj Nalavde. I'm a senior planner with the Planning Department. And this evening, I'm pleased to present bylaw C-109619, which is a text amendment to the land use bylaw. The city received an application from Select Engineering on behalf of Urban Development Institute, Spruce Grove Regional Committee, to amend the R2 mixed medium to high density residential district of the land use bylaw. This public hearing for this bylaw was advertised in the May 8th and May 15th editions of the Spruce Grove Examiner in accordance with the requirements of the MGA. I apologize, just a second.
No worries.
I'm sharing my screen. Okay. So the amendment is intended to allow for the development of a new type of row housing, which is street oriented and has rear attached garages on narrow lots that are 4.2 meters or 14 feet wide. The proposed lots are about 23% smaller than the current minimum standard of 5.5 meter widths allowed for row housing. This allows for a cost saving associated with the parcel size in a smaller unit, while also achieves a higher density target due to its smaller footprint. This aspect is particularly advantageous to the city in terms of meeting new density targets in new neighborhoods. The proposed row housing will be developed on fee simple lots, which is traditional individually titled lots, versus the traditional style of condominium development for row housing projects. The advantage of the new proposed system is that homeowners are not required to pay condo fee, which makes this type of row housing a highly sought after product in the market. From a site design perspective, the proposed row housing will be serviced by an alley, and each unit will have its own driveway and attached garages, providing a minimum of 2 on-site parking stalls. We anticipate that this higher on-site parking provision will reduce the overall impact on on-street parking. The proposed row housing will provide for a minimum landscaping standard of 1 tree and 1 shrub per unit, and this will result in a consistent and improved curb appeal of these developments. Since the first reading, administration has amended the proposed bylaw by retaining section 1163C2 to ensure the needed regulation and flexibility for other row housing types. The slideshow shows the regulation highlighted in yellow, which is being retained through an amendment to the bylaw brought forward for second reading. The proposed bylaw amendment will allow for row housing street-oriented uses on narrow fee simple lots. It will provide for increased choice in the housing market while allowing the city to achieve higher densities in new neighborhoods as prescribed by the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Growth Plan. With that, I conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll start off, I'll ask the clerk to start with. Has there anybody registered from the public to speak to this public hearing?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have 2 registrations for the public hearing.
Okay, let's hear from them and we'll get their introduction and see who they are.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am just going to quickly read the protocol for speaking. So the protocol for speaking during the virtual public hearing will be as follows. Presenters who have pre-registered will be given the opportunity to speak during the public hearing and will be announced by the city clerk when it is their turn. Presenters may only speak once and will have a maximum of 5 minutes to speak. The clerk will notify presenters when there are 30 seconds remaining. If you are part of a delegation, please select one speaker to present on behalf of the entire group. A delegation spokesperson may only speak once and will have a maximum of 5 minutes to speak. All questions and submissions must be directed to the chair and should be directly related to the public hearing. Protocol decisions of the chair are final and will not be debated.
Okay,
Our
thank you
first-
very- Yep, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our first registered speaker is Bladen Dibben of Select Engineering's Consultants.
Sorry, his name again was
Bladen Dibben.
Sladen? Okay,
Bladen.
welcome. Welcome.
Bladen, you may now proceed with your presentation.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. Thank you for this opportunity to present this proposed amendment to the R2 district to allow for narrower street-oriented townhome product. My name is Bladen Dibben. I'm a planner with Select Engineering. I'm here presenting with Rihanna Raymond from Qualico on behalf of UDI Spruce Grove. As Pankaj has just presented, we are proposing to reduce the minimum width of street-oriented townhouse lots within the R2 district to 4.2 meters, which would allow for 14-foot building pockets. This will provide another option for buying affordable ground-oriented homes in Spruce Grove as a fee simple product. With the recent situation surrounding COVID-19, people have experienced being isolated and staying at home through government regulation. So this was proposed prior to COVID-19 and is definitely a viable option, but this situation has brought to light even more how people maybe in apartments might want another option that's affordable and ground oriented, where they have some private outdoor space, access to their attached garage, don't need to use an elevator. And so it's just another attractive, affordable type of housing. I'll go to the next slide here. So the typical townhouse in Spruce Grove is 18 feet to 20 feet wide within existing neighborhoods. So this would reduce that down to 14 feet wide. You can see on the right of your screen, we've shown typical 18-foot width townhouse double car garage. Typically, they wouldn't be with rear attached garages, but with rear detached garage. This provides additional parking, especially on the 14-foot, where you can have a single car garage and a single car driveway. This maintains on-street parking without interruptions from front driveways. You can see also that with the 18-foot, there isn't a lot, with current townhouse, there's not a lot of space for snow storage and such and waste bins. But with the 14-foot, there is additional space with a single car garage. So it's one advantage between the two. And then so waste bin collection if by the rear lane. Still, with any townhouse or duplex, there's still a need to move waste bins and get in and around with your car, but this does provide a bit more flexibility in that. So some of the benefits, as I said, it does add another option for townhouse buyers with price sensitive within the price sensitive market. Most townhouses 18 to 20 feet wide on a lot depth of 35 meters. So this uses the advantage of the attached garage. It's using a 25-meter deep lot, so it's much shallower. This aligns with some of EMRB's policies targeting higher densities, and it's also a ground-oriented form. So it helps achieve that without having to build apartment towers. And then finally, just on that density, so townhomes, if you were to build all 14-foot townhomes in a row, you could get up to 80 units per hectare. A typical townhome at 35 meters deep would be closer to 40 to 45 units per hectare. So it's quite a big increase. 18-foot townhomes, maybe they're closer to 50 units per hectare. So for every 18-foot wide unit, you can get 5. For every 4 18-foot wide units, you can get 5 14-foot wide units. This is an overhead view of some townhomes. These are 18s, but they show the attached garage and the advantage of front street parking and the driveways in the back for additional parking. So 4 stalls with this type of product.
36-second warning.
Okay, thank you. So just as the last couple of slides, this is an existing building in Uplands in Edmonton that Qualco's developed. And then finally, another example here, 2 more examples there. So we're happy to answer any questions, and we hope that you approve this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Bladen, for the presentation. We do have another speaker on, but since you are presenting on it, I'm going to open up the floor to council right now if there's any questions for clarification. Councillor Grilke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bladen, thank you for the presentation. So just a quick question. You had mentioned Edmonton, are there examples of other municipalities that are allowing the 14-foot widths currently?
I'm currently working with cities of St. Albert on a similar product with the 14-foot width. So we're working through that. We're a little bit behind with you guys, but they are definitely considering that. City of Edmonton allows it, but I don't know about Leduc or Sherwood Park. I haven't checked there.
Okay, and just I know it's stated, but it would not be for, I know there's one area of Spruce Grove that we had to move waste removal into the front. That would not be required here, because are we going to have to give hypothetically more alley space, or is the alley space standard?
No, it would just be the standard alley space. That would be up to city administration or waste management on where the bins would go, either front or back.
And can somebody just reiterate for me what the current density targets are for EMRB? I can't, the numbers, is it 35? Oh, I'm a good lip reader, Stevenson. And then I guess I have a question for administration, but maybe I'll ask it during the bylaw reading. Can somebody reiterate to me too, during Mr. Love, I won't be able to pronounce his last name properly.
Nalabde.
Nalabde. I had it when you said it. Is there any, can somebody reiterate, you had said that it doesn't require them to pay condo fees. Can you repeat that reasoning for me?
Yes. Traditionally, when developments are built as part of a condominium, they have common roads, common landscaping, common waste removal, which requires them to pay condo fees. This one operates like a single detached home. You have a lot and you have the complete ownership and responsibility of the structure above you. The alleyways are serviced by the city. As such, there is no need for condominium fees. And so that helps people build more equity as they pay down the mortgage.
Have an example of what the cost differential would be, the 18-foot versus the 14-foot, or is that maybe unknown at this time?
I would defer that question to Bladen and the developers to answer it.
Okay.
And actually, we were hoping that Rihanna, who's with me, would also be unmiked or have her mic turned on. We were going to answer questions together if possible, and she may have a better answer for you. But I don't know the exact difference. If it was front feet, it would be 4 feet narrower. So
yeah,
10,
okay.
$10,000 versus for the lot alone, but also the depth of the lot at 25 meters would possibly be cheaper or allow for more density.
Okay, I'm gonna stop my questions there. I'll probably have some more during the bylaw presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Stevenson, do you have any questions for clarification in regards to the presentation?
Yeah, just one question. If we could just go back to the diagram, I guess, where you were comparing the 18-foot and the 14-foot one, if that's possible.
That
So,
one there?
I don't see it yet, but I have it in my thing. I guess my question is because, okay, yes, that one.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So when you look at the example you gave with the 18-foot, the garage is in the back and then the common area. So I live on a road right now where there are townhomes, like four row houses. And I've heard from the people that live in the middle that this is often a difficult predicament to be in, because if you have to mow a lawn in the back and the front, you either have to bring it through your house or you have to go around. So I'm wondering what the concerns are when you have the setup like this versus just having like no grass in the front or no grass in the back. So the way it looks like now, they would have to walk all the way around. So is this a common, like I've heard it from several people, is this a common concern that people have when they live in the middle of the row house?
Yes, that would be a concern, but it's typical in either the 18 or the 14 foot. It wouldn't change. Yeah, so there's, it's an inconvenience for sure of living in a townhouse.
So is there any way with the 14 ones that you can make it so there's no grass in the back?
Yeah,
or is that a landscaping thing that?
Definitely it's a landscape that you could put rock there instead of grass.
Okay, so they're not going to be required to keep grass in the back versus something
There's
else,
no
just so they're not moving
regulation.
everything around.
There's no regulation that I know of that would require grass in the back.
Okay, yeah, it's just pretty narrow. So anyway, I just wanted clarification. It seems to be a common concern my neighbors seem to have, so.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor McKenzie.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I just have one question where I was confused is the garages are in the back on all of the units, right? The 14 and the 18?
That's correct. And yes.
Okay. And so then I guess my concern is like there are 3 stories. And so is it 2 stories above the garage then? Does it extend? Because you can't really tell from the pictures.
Yeah, I'll share my screen here. So you can see where we put the car. So the garage would extend to just past where the car is in this picture. So you would still have a front room, and stairs would take up part of that, but there is still a main floor, a middle floor, and a top floor. It's just, yeah, the garage would definitely take up part of that bottom floor. So these floors are about 600 square feet total.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Roth, did you have a question for clarification?
Yes, I do, to Mr. Bladen. I'm not asking for exact numbers, of course, because you don't know, but I'm just wondering how much demand you see for this type of a product.
Rihanna, maybe you would be best to answer that one.
Hi. Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the opportunity to join you. I guess the short
Point of
answer.
order, Mr. Mayor. Brianna, can you please ensure that you are not watching the stream online? We're getting a little bit of feedback on our end.
Oh.
Thank you.
Okay, try that.
Is that better?
It's not too bad.
There certainly
Sorry
is some
about that.
feedback.
Is that better?
Through you,
All right.
Mr. Mayor, to Rihanna, it's not. If you can turn
So
off
I
the
guess
stream
obviously,
completely.
sorry if you can hear me, Rihanna Raymond on behalf of Qualico Communities, and I'm pleased to be with you this evening to speak in support of this. I guess to answer your question, we have implemented this in the city of Edmonton already, and the approval was and servicing was done last year in 2019, and we've already begun construction of these units, and they're actually already being sold. So obviously, this being a brand new product type, an innovative product type to the area and to the region, I should say, as a fee simple lot, the feedback that we're getting right now, or I guess the market interest, has been successful so far. With the units that have been constructed, they are already being sold because the price point is so great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rihanna. Okay, I don't see any further questions for Bladen. So thanks very much, Bladen, for the presentation. In regards to this fee simple lot, it's a different product for sure, and we'll have a little bit further discussion about that definitely later on this evening. Thanks very much for the presentation, and I'll conclude that with asking our city clerk for additional speakers. Is there somebody else that would like to speak to this public hearing?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding is we actually made an administrative error on our end, and there was only one registrant, which was Bladen Dibbin. So unless Rihanna Riemann, would you like to make a presentation yourself on behalf of Qualico?
On behalf of Qualico, I'm just pleased to speak in support of this text amendment this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. So on the live stream, I will ask the public if they would like to email in to our city clerk's office if they'd like to speak to this public hearing. I'll just give you a little bit of time to do that.
Mr. Mayor, we've received no email submissions to date.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'll have we had any other written correspondence, Mrs. Gray, in regards to this public hearing? Have we had any written correspondence at all?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, we have not received any further written correspondence.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go back to my council colleagues. I knew they had the opportunity to speak directly with Mr. Bladen, but are there any other questions for clarification from council? Councillor McKenzie? No? Okay. Okay. Seeing none for the third and final time this evening, is there anybody here that would like to email in for an opportunity to do a question in regards to this public hearing?
And just point of order, Mr. Mayor. So the email address is cityclerk@sprucegrove.org.
Okay. So that email address again is cityclerk@sprucegrove.org. And I'm going to defer back to my city clerk to let me know when, the ample time has been given.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm checking my email here and we haven't received any further correspondence on this matter. So if you and council are comfortable, you may close the hearing.
Okay. Seeing nothing further from our city clerk in regards to emails and such, I'll declare this public hearing closed. Did you hear that? Okay. Don't have my gavel, it's upstairs, they actually brought it. But anyway, public hearing is closed. Thank you very much for the presentation. And we'll be also dealing with this in the next portion of our meeting a little bit later on. Okay, thank you very much. Back to Just going to move forward here for our next public hearing. Okay, I'd like to open up the public hearing on C1102-19. It's a public hearing on the Municipal Development Plan Amendment to the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board and updates. Mr. Lavasier, do you have a presenter for that? I'll ask the clerk actually to review the hearing procedures again. We need to do that prior to, we don't need another council opening statement, but I'll ask the clerk if she could please review the hearing procedures. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So once again, this
Who is supposed to present?
Mr. Lavasier, your microphone is unmuted right now. So pardon me, Mr. Mayor. So this public hearing is being held virtually in accordance with with meeting procedures COVID-19 suppression regulation and city bylaw C-112-20. Those interested in making a submission during the hearing may do so by sending an email to cityclerk@sprucegrove.org. Email submissions will be accepted until the close of the hearing. Those requesting to speak to make a verbal submission were required to register by noon today. The process for the hearing will be as follows. Administration will make a presentation first. Council will then hear from those who have pre-registered to speak. The city clerk will then read into the record any written submissions received by email. Council will then be given the opportunity to ask clarifying questions of administration, and the city clerk will then read into the record any additional written submissions that have been received by email. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just wanted to, again, remind the public if they would like to speak to this public hearing, that they can do so by emailing cityclerk@sprucegrove.org. So I just wanted to add a little reminder to that. So then I'll refer back to Mr. Lavasier on the presentation in regards to the MDP amendment to the EMRB.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My apologies. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. I'm having trouble with my headset tonight, but I was just confirming whether or not Mr. Nalavde was doing all three this evening, but in fact, Mr. Pushko will be taking the Municipal Development Plan Amendment public hearing. So C-1102-19, the public hearing for the Municipal Development Plan. Mr. Pushko, planner with City Spruce Grove, will be providing that information to council and the public this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am going to start sharing my presentation. So I trust it's all up and viewable to everybody. So thank you for the introduction. This evening, Mr. Mayor and Council, we have, as Mr. Lavasier introduced, bylaw C-1102-19, the public hearing for that. It is a municipal development plan amendment for making updates for the Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Board. So this bylaw proposes to make changes to bring the municipal development plan in conformance with the growth plan of the Edmonton Metropolitan Region, and to make some minor maintenance type changes that take advantage of this update opportunity. So you may recall approximately 2 years ago, Council approved a regional context statement on October 9, 2018, that outlined how the city's MDP conforms or diverges with the spirit and intent of the new growth plan. This resolution also directed administration to prepare MDP amendments required to bring into conformity our municipal development plan. The following MDP amendments, as were identified in the regional context statement, propose to bring the city's municipal development plan into conformance in 2 ways. So to up the capital, or in several ways. So the first was to update capital region usage to Edmonton Metropolitan Region in text, figures, and definitions. Identify that the city is within the metropolitan policy tier area of the Edmonton Metropolitan Regional structure. Additionally, policy is added encouraging a 10% increase of residential dwelling units in built-up urban areas, including established neighborhoods. Add an established neighborhood land use category on the municipal development plan. figures 7 and 8, and remove existing 25 dwelling unit per net residential hectare maximum density for established neighborhoods. So in addition, there would be an increase in new area structure plan minimum greenfield residential density to 35 dwelling units per net residential hectare, and to add policy to pursue achieving an aspirational density target of 100 dwelling units per net residential hectare in the city center area. This bylaw has changed from first reading by an adjustment to policy 5.2.3.1 to more clearly address built-up urban areas. So we've added that language in there specifically from the growth plan to clarify that not just established neighborhoods, but also other built-up areas as defined by the EMRB are applicable for targets an aspirational increase of 10% in residential dwelling units. In addition, the definition as provided by the growth plan for built-up urban areas is included, and it refers to lands that were part of a plan of subdivision registered prior to December 31st, 2016. So that is reflected in the new bylaw for second reading. There's also an update in policy for area structure plans amendments that are referred to the Edmonton Regional Board for a regional evaluation framework review where required. The new MDP update adds support policy for the Edmonton International Airport and adds policy requiring agricultural impact assessments. Now I'll take a minute to identify a couple MDP maintenance type updates that take advantage of this opening up of the municipal development plan. So in here, we've removed references that no annexations are required during the life of the MDP. So our existing plan had alluded to that. We are currently going under an annexation. And so this inconsistency is being corrected here by removal of that language. Updating the existing and future land use maps for recent changes. So we've updated those, and also adjusting the gateway lands terminology in the municipal development plan to be the now Westwind lands language. Administration supports this bylaw, and should council feel that they need further information or wish to leave the public hearing open for input, they may choose to adjourn this public hearing to a later date. Available for questions, and that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Pushko. Getting a little bit of feedback from somewhere, but at any rate, thank you very much for your presentation. Mrs. Gray, do we have any speakers registered to speak to this public hearing?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have no registered speakers for this public hearing.
None at all, eh? Okay. So, okay, thank you very much. So on my call to ask people if they would like to email in to register to speak, they can do so by contacting us by emailing the city clerk at sprucegrove.org. So for the second time this evening, I'll ask that again. Just ask public if they would like to email in, if they'd like to speak to this public hearing. Again, cityclerk@sprucegrove.org is the email address. You could try that. Mrs. Gray, do we have any written submissions at all in regards to this public hearing?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No written submissions have been received for this public hearing.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to ask my colleagues on City Council if they have any questions for Mr. Pushko in regards to questions of clarity in regards to the municipal development plan and MDP plan. Councillor Acker, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just a question on process. So with the new policy change to 5.2.3.1 with the 10% increase in density in all established areas of the city, when that policy comes, when it becomes part of the MDP, does that trigger that we need to look at the land use zoning for each of our districts to be in compliance with that direction of a policy? Or what's the process following an MDP approval with a policy like this in place?
Mr. Pushko?
Mr. Mayor, through to the councilor's question. So yes, this is new policy at the highest level of policy in the city for development, the municipal development plan. So once this is passed, we will be doing a review for any further changes that might come. This is an aspirational density, and so there are certain aspects within the existing land use bylaw, which is the regulatory document, that do allow for certain types of land uses that may provide this increase. So we would be assessing that, and if there was additional regulation required, we would be bringing that back at a future date.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stevenson, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up to what Councillor Acker was asking about 5.2.3.1. So with that, it says that you're going to encourage intensification up to 10%. So is that even enforceable? Like, I guess I understand like what we're trying to do. And obviously there's going to be some changes coming now with, as Councillor Acker asked about the land use for each of the neighborhoods, but how are we supposed to enforce encouragement?
Yeah, so there will be, upon study, probably some likely ways that we may be able to encourage this aspirational increase. The one that pops into my mind is secondary suites, which we do currently allow in certain areas. So I would suggest that we would look at that to see if that was available in all areas as a quick win. And then you would look at matters in terms of infill opportunities or those type of things that when the neighborhood areas are established, that we can record and see if infill is creating bigger or larger developments that may include more density, and just looking for opportunities to provide direction about different ways that density may be accommodated in new or existing development areas.
Okay, that's great. And I'm sure we'll talk about this more later, but I do appreciate that clarification.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Stevenson, and thank you very much, Mark, for your response to that. So for the third and final time this evening, is there anybody here that would like to address us through the public hearing through an email? They can do so by contacting our city clerk at cityclerk@sprucegrove.org, and she's standing by keeping an eye on the emails, and she's going to let me know when it's okay to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've received no email submissions, and we have asked 3 times, so I think we are good to go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Therefore, I'll declare this public hearing closed. And thank you very much, Mr. Pushgrove, for the presentation. And I'll move on to our third public hearing this evening. And this is a public hearing. It's a C1104-19. It's a public hearing, 2019. It's a land use bylaw review amendment. So I'll open the public hearing on that. And Mr. Lavasheur, can you introduce our presenter on this one?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, we have Mr. Nalavde here to present on this public hearing.
Okay, thank you very much. Just before the presentation by Mr. Lavje, I'll ask our city clerk if she would please read the preamble, her required preamble to this public hearing as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, this public hearing is being held virtually in accordance with the meeting procedures COVID-19 suppression regulation and city bylaw C-1120-20. Those interested in making a submission during the hearing may do so by sending an email to cityclerk@sprucegrove.org. Email submissions will be accepted until the close of the hearing. Those requesting to make a verbal submission were required to register by noon today. The process for the hearing will be as follows. Administration will make a presentation first. Council will then hear from those who have pre-registered to speak. The city clerk will then read into the record any written submissions received by email. Council will be given the opportunity to ask clarifying questions of administration, and the city clerk will read into the record any additional written submissions received by email. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. And go ahead, Mr. Is it, how do you say it? Is it Lavje?
It's Nalavde.
Malabde. Okay, hope I got it right.
Apologize for the challenge.
Okay, no worries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, once again. This is a presentation for bylaw C110419, which is an annual update to the land use bylaw. Public hearing for this bylaw was advertised in the May 8th and May 15th edition of Spruce Grove Examiner in accordance with the requirements of the MGA. Okay, bylaw C82412, which is the city's land use bylaw, was originally adopted in late 2012 and implemented on January 1st, 2013. Planning and Development undertakes an annual review and update of the land use bylaw to continually improve regulations and ensure that the document stays current to accommodate industry standards. The purpose of this update is to fine-tune regulations, provide enhanced clarity, and fix inconsistencies. For the year 2019, the update proposes amendments focused on improving regulations in 6 key areas, as are shown on the slide, and I will go through the details of each. First one was new defined uses for assisted living facility and designated assisted living facility. The purpose behind introducing these uses is to ensure that the city has the necessary regulations to attract developments that cater to the seniors market and the assisted living market. We have included new definitions that align with provincial definitions and included supporting parking regulations, which require less parking for assisted living facilities and therefore will allow the developers to develop their sites more effectively and efficiently. The second area is inclusion of new definitions for construction completion certificate, impermeable materials, and turf grass. And these definitions are intended to provide clarity and consistency with engineering standards, as well as consistency with the traffic bylaw. Third item is introducing enhanced discretionary powers for development officers respecting industrial uses that deal with hazardous materials. So this will allow development officers to ask for a risk assessment when permitting an industrial use that involves hazardous materials. So we may have impact within the development, or we may have impact beyond it. And it is really important for development officers to know that. So that is the purpose of that. Fourth item is clarified regulations respecting landscaping requirements on low density developments. Low density developments mean single detached, semi-detached, and other forms of row housing. This clarification makes it clear that low density developments do not have to provide landscaping plans prepared by architects or landscape architects, which can add cost. But they otherwise must provide landscaping to meet the landscaping requirements, which means providing trees and shrubs. And the development industry, for the most part, does this very well through the architectural controls. But having a regulation means that every developer will provide a predictable and consistent outcome, which is what we want. The next item is amended regulations respecting landscaping on city-owned boulevards. So these are intended to clarify that landscaping on city boulevards shall not include the use of rocks, gravel, or other forms of material, which can create potential hazards for public works during maintenance. Landscaping on these strips of boulevards will be limited to turf grass. The next item is an amended height regulation in the R2 mixed medium to high density regulation district, residential district. There are 3 key changes with regards to height and what we are changing in the regulation. First is we are increasing the height of 4-story buildings from a max of 14 meters to 15 meters. And this is to accommodate emerging industry standard of a building height. Second change is clarifying that all developments, when they are adjacent to districts that allow single detached homes as a permitted use, the height will be limited to 4 stories. So whether that's an apartment or if it's a senior facility, what may be, we have common standards. The third change is when development sites are not adjacent to residential districts that permit single detached dwellings, such developments can build up to 4 stories. Further, development may exceed 4 stories at the discretion of the development officer. The city currently does have the engineering capacity and the servicing capacity to accommodate higher developments. And so if we are able to attract, say, assisted living facilities or whatnot that may want to go beyond 4 stories, we do have the capacity, and through this regulation change, we will open the envelope to attract these new developments to our city. So these changes to the height regulations will allow the city to attract other forms of four-story developments apart from just apartments to the R2 district. The proposed amendments will enhance and clarify the definitions and regulations to allow the development community as well as staff to better utilize the city's land use bylaw. In terms of consultation, the Spruce Grove chapter of UDI were also circulated a draft of the bylaw, and their comments were incorporated in the amendment that is proposed and is in front of us today. And UDI has provided their support to these amendments as well. With that, I will conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm going to just remind the public if they would like to chime in on this public hearing, they can do so by emailing our city clerk at cityclerk@sprucegrove.org. And I'd ask the clerk right now, have we had any speakers registered for this public hearing?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just check the email, and no, we have not had any speakers registered for this this public hearing.
Okay, just for the second time this evening, then I'll ask those watching live stream if they'd like to speak to this public hearing. They can email our city clerk at cityclerk@sprucegrove.org. Have we had any written submissions at all in regards to this public hearing?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have not received any written submissions, nor have we received any email submissions to, at this particular juncture. Thank you.
Okay, I'll open up the floor to my colleagues on council. If they have any questions of our presenter, let me know if you'd like to speak or ask a question for clarification. Councillor McKenzie, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to administration, I guess I just want a little bit of clarity. I know under the background, it does say that the Planning and Development Department undertakes an annual review. When you talk about the annual review, you're not re-looking at the whole land use bylaw, I'm assuming, or is it more throughout the year you might get recommendations from developers and that sort of thing, and then you potentially just look at those sorts of things? And if that is the case, how often is it recommended that we do a review of the whole land use bylaw and looking at that sort of thing?
Through Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councillor McKenzie. To answer your question, you're partly right. We do initiate the annual review mid-year. And what that does is it allows us to learn lessons from the initial development application period, right from January to say June. And we learn some challenges. There are sometimes new development typologies that are coming forward. And so we try to attempt to make sure we have the regulations for those new emerging issues. Sometimes it is to mitigate some negative circumstances or fix some loopholes. But we do a fairly comprehensive process where we go to other departments and say, what are the issues that you would like addressed in this year's review? So it's a fairly long list, and we go through a consultation process to see what works, what doesn't, and then we make the final draft bylaw, and then we again go back to all the departments as well as external agencies such as the UDI to make sure that this really works for everyone. I am fairly new to the city, and I'm not entirely sure how often the entire land use bylaw is revised, but I think that's an answer. Maybe we can come back to council and provide an update on that question.
Perfect. Thanks for the clarity on that.
Mrs. Armstrong, do you want to weigh in on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I can comment on how often the land use bylaw is reviewed. And typically it's on a 10+ year cycle. Council may be aware that we're hoping to review the municipal development plan over the next year or two for a new municipal development plan. And then coming out of that, then we're looking at doing a full-scale land use bylaw review. So hopefully we'll have a new land use bylaw in place in 2022, 2023. Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, yeah, it does. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Acker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question out of curiosity. Why in our land use bylaw do we define stories rather than just the height? So I notice right now in our R2, we have kind of an exception to the rule based on the number of stories, but it's not to the height of the measured building. So is there a reason why we specifically state the stories and not just the height?
I think most regulations are written to identify both. One is the overall height and one is the story. The reason why we specifically go to height is to make sure that fire services or other services are able to get to that height and service that building. In terms of the stories, it's a question of how does the building form look, right? Sometimes the first story starts slightly higher or lower. And so we want to make sure that we regulate even the form to some extent so that we don't have something that's really big or small next to a house, and that can create some transition challenges, as well as the regulation is comprehensive from a technical side that we can reach to the height and service that building when that situation arises.
Excellent. Thank you so much. One other question, and one thing I don't know, I was looking through on our land use bylaw, but we don't seem to have any, policies in place or measurements for shadowing effect of taller buildings. And as we, develop the city and we become, more densified, height may have an impact to surrounding neighborhoods that may have solar panels or enjoyment of the yard. Do you know if we have something in place that I may have just missed on shading of building height?
Through Mr. Mayor, Councilor's question, we do not currently have a regulation pertaining to shadows. What we do have is a regulation that says when a building is built next to a single detached home, it can only go up to 4 stories. And that does the same, it achieves the same purpose, which is not to cast heavy shadows or heavy presence over a low density building. Shadow studies have become a tool to analyze, especially when you have really tall buildings that exceed 7-10 stories that are immediately built. I think we currently do not have that problem because we have that regulation that makes sure that this transition is taken care of. But I think if we start getting more applications that want to explore some of these higher density developments or tall developments, then it might be an exercise worth pursuing at that point.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
No other further questions or comments? Okay, for the third and final time this evening, I just wanted to remind anybody they could contact our city clerk at cityclerk@sprucegrove.org if they would like to join in on the conversation in regards to the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've received no further email submissions this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much for the presentation and the update. This is just an annual update that we do. And I think an example of that is the regulations in regards to development officer to ensure that we have a, something in there in regards to chemical use and requiring risk assessment and all that. And, that comes out of the work that we do throughout the year that we recognize. That's just an example, but thank you very much for your presentation. So with that, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And thank you very much for the presentations as we move forward. Okay, we're going to go to public question and answer period. Is there, just ask the clerk, is there anybody registered to speak or ask questions of the public or ask questions of council during the public question and answer period?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've received no request to speak during public question and answer period. And I'm just checking our email now, and we have not received any emails either.
Okay, thank you very much. Seeing nothing further on that, then we'll move forward. I'll go to 8A under councillor statements and updates, and I would ask Councillor Grilke, and she wanted to provide an update in regards to the business community. Councillor Grilke, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to take a second. I had posted on social media asking businesses if there was anything that the city could do, and one of the suggestions was to maintain a list of open businesses, and unfortunately the city maybe doesn't have that capacity, so we were referred to the chamber. And so in consultation with some of my other counselors, Councillor Acker, who's the member for the Chamber Board. I reached out to the Chamber of Commerce, and they are actually in partnership with a private company called Get in the Loop. Because of course the Chamber is tasked to promote member businesses, but they wanted to extend some opportunities to all businesses in the area. So they've done a free partnership with a business again called Get in the Loop, and it's an app-based business, but any business in the area can sign up for a free ongoing membership, and Get in the Loop and the Chamber will partner in promoting said businesses. So I just wanted to make mention of that so that if there's any businesses that are listening or that are in the area, to contact either the Greater Parkland Regional Chamber of Commerce at 963-4545 or to get in contact with the Get in the Loop rep to advertise your business for free for the near future. So thank you for indulging me in that time, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to my fellow colleagues for giving me some time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. I'll ask my colleagues as well. Do they have any questions to Councillor Grilke in regards to her presentation on Get in the Loop? Okay, seeing none, I'll just ask Councillor Grilke could make a motion to accept for information her report.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that my report be accepted as information.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Grilke. With that, I'll call the question on the motion in regards to that. Those in favor? Thank you. It's been carried. Okay, thank you very much. We're past 9A. That has been in our consent agenda. So we'll go to 9B under COVID-19 update. Mr. Farbrother?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As of 1 p.m. today, there were no active cases of COVID in the Spruce Grove area, and 8 recovered. That isn't a statement that COVID is not in the community. It's a statement that there are no known cases. About 12 weeks ago, globally, there were about 1,000 new cases a day. And currently in the world, there's about 100,000 new cases a day. So globally, COVID is still very much a real factor. Obviously, in our local environment, the numbers are way down, but the messages around social distancing still apply and are likely to apply for the next year and a half or whatever until a vaccine is ultimately found and becomes readily available to people. Notwithstanding that, a fair bit of work in terms of opening up activities. Obviously, the priority is to be opening things that have an economic impact, then a social opportunity, and then less focus on things that either benefit special interest groups or have limited public input where the risk profile just doesn't warrant opening up things. So in that regard, the pickleball courts have been opened in the last week, and basketball courts and the tennis courts. They're based on the premise that no more than 50 people, and that there is the ability to obtain and achieve social distancing for residents. We've also opened the playgrounds, and about 3/4 of the playgrounds are now opened. Again, it's at casual use, and use at your own risk, because none of these structures are cleaned or disinfected on a regular basis. So we'd encourage people who are using these facilities to ensure that they clean their hands before and after using facilities. The other piece is that we would also encourage people to use their local park facilities, because that in a sense creates local pods and reduces any risk of cross-city contamination. Sports fields, unfenced sports fields are open for casual use in accordance with provincial regulations. We understand there's a recent tweet through public health that will maybe looking at broadening that in terms of sports groups use, and so we'll take a look at that. But to date, formalized leagues within all sports are still viewed as not permitted throughout the province. We will take a look at whether we open up some of our closed fields. If we did, we'd probably do it on a low maintenance model, because we wouldn't be looking to maintain facilities that aren't being used for competitive sports activities. In terms of emergency management, our emergency management agency continues to meet to review changes in any provincial guidance. And bylaw enforcement continues to follow an approach of education and awareness. And so far to date, we've not had to use formal enforcement rules to encourage the public to practice social distancing. We know it's a challenging time in the sense that with the summer coming and people wanting to get out, but the biggest method and the most effective method to control COVID in Spruce Grove is by people following social distancing protocols. And that's my update.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Farbrother, on the update. And I know that I appreciate the administration being closely aligned with Alberta Health Services, and I think that's the fallback for us in regards to how and when we open certain facilities. And I think there's an opportunity for us to get further information in regards to how that's going to affect some of our other user groups that are fairly vocal in wanting and anxious to get out there with the sport programs. But we know that's coming sometime down the road, and we'll just wait for that announcement from the province to relax that, and then we can follow line with them. So I'll open up the floor to my colleagues on council if they have any questions for clarity to Mr. Farbrother in regards to his COVID-19 update. I'll ask that question. Councillor Acker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a question that we get from our residents during this COVID crisis, but maybe just for educational purposes, administration can help guide. When someone sees something that they think might be breaching the public health regulations or maybe unsafe, there's overcrowding in a business or a playground, what is the proper process that a resident could take to report that? And should they be calling the city, the province? Just, I think there's some unclarity there, and if you could maybe provide that, that would help.
Certainly they can contact bylaw enforcement. That would be probably the most obvious opportunity. We'd probably advise people not to try to resolve the issue themselves. Sometimes people react positively to that. Sometimes people don't react positively to that. And then suddenly we end up with an altercation or something which is in nobody's interest. So I think probably the simplest way is if you see something, if you can let us know, then we will go and investigate. And then if there's an issue, we can get that issue resolved. Generally, we're continually getting feedback from enforcement services that once people are being reminded of social distancing or numbers, the vast majority of people have been very respectful and have followed that.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, could I get one of my colleagues to accept the COVID-19 update for information from Mr. Farbrother?
So move, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, moved by Councillor Acker to accept Mr. Farbrother's update on the COVID-19 in Spruce Grove. And just before I call the question, I just wanted to reiterate what Mr. Farbrother talked about in regards to, we are in a good place in our region, but however, we certainly want to make sure that we continue that. And the reason we are in good shape is because of the work that our citizens have been doing. So, and as Mr. Farbrother indicated, COVID-19 hasn't gone away, so let's keep that in mind and move forward with all the social distancing and all the health protocols. Thank you. So with that, I'll call a question on the motion to accept for information under the Councillor Acker's motion. All those in favor? Okay, thank you very much. That's been carried. Moving on to our bylaws. Could I get a motion, please, for 10A, second reading? Councillor Stevenson, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that second reading be given to bylaw C-1096-19, text amendment R2 district, fee simple row housing as amended.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Stevenson. Mr. Lavasier, a new type of housing in our community, and could you introduce our presenter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, we have Mr. Nalavade here to provide council with some information relative to second reading of this bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Nalavade, this is an opportunity for the city to look at a new form of housing that's going to do a few things, and you can bring us up to date on what that's going to do for us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Administration has brought a request for decision seeking Council's second reading of bylaw 109619, which is a text amendment to the land use bylaw. The proposed amendment will allow for a new typology of row housing, street-oriented with rear-attached garages on fee simple lots in the R2 mixed medium to high density residential district. Since the first reading of this bylaw, administration has amended the bylaw by retaining section 1163C2 to ensure regulations and flexibility for other row housing types. This regulation is highlighted in yellow, and you can see what was proposed at first reading and what is in front of us today. Administration supports this bylaw as amended. A detailed presentation was provided earlier in the evening during the public hearing of this bylaw. Largely, this new typology will provide more choice in the market. It will allow the city to achieve higher density targets in the new neighborhoods with approved area structure plans, so we can conform to the EMRB regulations and requirements. With that, I will conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions council may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And you indicated that this has been vetted by administration, and administration has reviewed this with UDI, and they support this this new type of housing for our city.
Yes.
So I'll open up the floor to my colleagues on council for any questions for clarification under second reading. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Councillor Acker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering if I could get a little more clarification on the rationale with the tie into the regulations to the R1 district within this bylaw. Is this going to be a future update to the R1 district to allow this type of housing? Because I believe currently it's a discretionary use for, I think, up to 4 units of row housing. So I'm just curious.
What that regulation 116 really does is that if a developer wants to build a row house of a slightly lower density, so for example, in the Greenberry neighborhood, you can see some row homes where the row house unit faces the road, then there is a bit of a backyard, and there's a detached garage that is serviced by the alley. Now that is a slightly lower density product, and it is predominantly located or intended for the R1 districts. Now, if a developer is building a whole variety of developments, that regulation allows him to build those row housing forms without going through an amendment. So it really saves the process of going through an amendment when they want to pick and choose and do some of the single detached or developments from the R1 district. That is really the goal of that district. So developers are constantly trying to balance the density goals as well as the diversity of product goals. So that's why we've kept that regulation the way it is. And we may in the future look at revising that, but that is the whole flexible zoning concept that we have in the city. And that's why we've kept it in accordance with the request from UDI.
Excellent. Just another question. I'm happy with this product. I think it's great having the rear garage attached. It gives some new opportunities. But one thing that I'm noticing, and I don't know what the city can do about it, but in a lot of the higher dense or more dense developments, because they're a smaller home, a lot of people have gone and converted their garage to the man cave or to storage and not using it for parking. So that creates the problem of street parking, which is causing difficulties with garbage pickup, the other neighbors. Is there something within our regulations or ability to ensure that parking that is defined for that dwelling is being used as parking? Because I'm seeing this time and time again, and it's a concern as we see more densification, that it may show 2 parking spots on site, but in fact, that's been used as another bonus room and there's more cars in the neighborhood. So it's one thing I'm struggling with as we look at these new models.
Through Mr. Mayor, Councillor Ackler, I think this is a problem that is happening in many municipalities. We have control over certain things. We can control what happens on the street, and we can have enforcement surrounding that. We really cannot enforce how a unit owner uses his garage space. What we can do is make sure that developments are planning for a garage within the unit and one on the driveway. So we are trying to make sure that there is more parking space to accommodate this growing need to use their garage in a different way. So that's what this particular application is doing. In many cases, you may just have the building and the parking is outside. And if you have more than 2 vehicles, then you're going to impact the street. This is a step forward in the terms that it allows for more on-site parking. So that's the best we can do in making sure we have more provisions. But in terms of enforcing how somebody uses their garage, I think we might be challenged to upset the community. So we just have to plan better. We have to plan more attractive streets and hope for the best.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Roth.
Thank you, Mayor Houston. I will admit right off the bat that I have very serious concerns about this. My concerns are in the area of parking. We've heard that many times in areas where the density is higher. Parking, garbage pickup, and snow removal and storage. So I'm going to ask a similar question to what I asked UDI during the public hearing, and that is, and it was answered adequately by them, but how much of this inventory do we expect to see in our community? Probably it's impossible to give actual numbers, I'm sure, but I'm just looking for an idea of the prevalence of this type of housing product, what we anticipate it might be, and I'll define what I mean by this type of housing product. I'll include any areas where the lot widths are the 14 meters, the 18 to 20 meters, because in my opinion, they're all inadequate. So I wonder if you could give me an answer to that question, please.
Through Mr. Mayor, Mr. Councillor, I think we know right now that the Eastern neighborhood is going to be one of the places where this product will be applied for. And the second area where we are going to see this product is probably the Copperhaven neighborhood. These are 2 emerging neighborhoods where this product is coming in. In terms of how much does it constitute as a market share, it is really difficult to speculate on that at this point, given that these neighborhoods are fairly new. But I would estimate about 25 to 30% of the product is definitely going to be this product. I think what it really does to the market is it provides choice. There are the single detached typologies, there are semi-detached typologies. Within row housing, there are those with yards, and then there are some of these which don't have these backyards but have different kind of parking arrangement. So broadly, when we look at the overall diversity of housing product, this is an addition that will give people some choice. How much of it will sell and what its uptake will be, I think there's going to be a learning curve on how the market takes on these units. And I think that will inform the developers. It will inform the planning department as well. But right now, to give you a clear answer, I think the Eastern neighborhood and Copperhaven are areas where this will be applied.
Okay. You're muted, Councillor Roth. you want to change that mute button?
Okay, sorry, I didn't do that. I understand that we're required to comply with Edmonton Metropolitan Region Growth Plan density requirements. I also understand that administration is supporting this change. And I understand that this will help us to get there. However, we seem to be attempting to do that at the expense of a few neighborhoods. And you've just added 2 more to the ones I'm already aware of, where we're cramming in small lots despite what I see as the resulting parking problems, as well as the garbage problem that I mentioned, as well as snow removal and snow storage, which was addressed in the public hearing presentation as well. I'm asking, why does administration not share my concerns, particularly about parking?
The administration definitely shares your concern regarding parking. And I think that is one of the key reasons you see that some of these new applications are trying to provide more on-site parking. This would not be the case with some of the older row housing condominium styles. So I think the development industry, recognizing the need of homeowners, is taking a step in that direction. What it really does, you're right that we have to balance this requirement of meeting density target of new neighborhoods. So every time we introduce a small compact housing form that achieves higher density target, it opens the door for developers to build some of the traditional single detached housing stock that families also want. So this housing typology is trying to provide a bit of a balance. We are making strides to make sure that parking is addressed, that street integrity is maintained. And there are some questions surrounding servicing. You're right. These compact developments are going to have a higher impact. And one of the things we are discussing is to make sure that the standard of the alleyways are sufficient enough to deal with the impact, and we don't have to do garbage collection and such items from the front street. So we share your concern. We are looking at the market to also provide more affordable options on the market, so there is more choice. And it's just a balancing act that we are all trying to work out.
Okay, I'm not sure that the balancing act that we're trying to achieve here, or we're trying to attain here, is satisfactory to me. So I guess I'll close off by saying I understand what developers want. And builders, they want to be able to put more product onto the market that is at a price point that more people can afford. And they want to sell more inventory. That's the bottom line for them. They're profit motivated. I get that. I also understand from the point of view of homeowners or prospective homeowners who maybe can't afford a higher level of housing development. And this opens up the housing market or home ownership to more individuals. I don't think I can support this, because I have grave concerns about the issues that I've mentioned. And I understand that city administration are supporting this. However, I see serious problems where we have problems now in certain areas. For example, Spruce Village has, which is near where I live, there's significant parking problems now, and I don't see it getting any better throughout our community with the addition of more smaller lots. You mentioned 25 to 30% of housing inventory, and that scares me. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Grilke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to administration, Mr. Nalabde, is there any way that can be captured in the bylaw to support a mix of the 14-foot and 18-foot, or a mix of those widths? And the reason I ask that is because my fear is that there will be nothing to promote that mix, and we would have a high concentration of the 14-foot product, which I feel plays into some of my other colleagues' concerns, mine as well. So I'm wondering if there's any way to capture supporting a mix.
A direct answer is yes, we do have the ability. What I would like to share is that if we look at what the market is building right now, having seen some of the developments in other cities, Edmonton, when they put a building that is 4 units, developers try to mix it naturally. Like you will generally find 18-foot units on the side and 14 in the middle, and they try to play with that mix so that you're not creating sort of a cookie cutter product all the time. So right now the industry is doing that by themselves. If the city feels that we should have a more regulatory approach to forcing that issue, then we may have to look at an amendment to the regulations and bring it forward.
I would be open to that because I have no problem with developers and builders offering something of all price points. My concern is that when we do that at the cost or at the integrity of our other standards, and I know Councillor McKenzie talks about our standards all the time. So for example, I live up the street from Kenton Way where they have to do front garbage collection because the back alleys aren't wide enough. So I think that while I, in theory, don't have a problem with the smaller mix, I want to make sure that all of our other standards, either road widths or back alley widths or, architectural controls are all equal to that, so that you're not just something that is smaller, you're also getting. I have a hard time with us being at the early stages of the learning curve. I know that it's happening, say, in Edmonton, but you had mentioned St. Albert is in preliminary discussions, or one of the presenters had. So we're kind of in that beginning of the learning curve. And so while I want to give the Spruce Grove advantage, I don't want to do that at the expense of people's experiences of living here. So, and then are we really having a challenge of meeting growth targets that we wouldn't try to encourage a good mix?
So through Mr. Mayor,
we're not.
Councillor Gilkey, you've raised a few points. We are at the beginning of the learning curve. I can share with you one of the issues that came up during the review of this project was the impact on the alleys and whether they can take the amount of truck vehicle movement that is going to happen and whatnot. So I can assure you that those conversations are happening, and there is going to be potentially some evolution of the engineering standard to make sure these alleyways are robust enough to handle the pressure. We have some language in this amendment surrounding architectural controls to make sure that buildings have clearly identified frontages and facades. So there is an element of architecture that makes these buildings a little bit more attractive. I've spoken to the landscaping component, which should increase curb appeal. So we're taking all these steps to increase the overall curb appeal of these developments. And that is, for the city to build a better city. And I think we do have some challenge in terms of we've struggled to attract apartment developments, for example. And I think the market in general is struggling because there is a condo fee component that doesn't add to your equity. And I think a number of people want to see other choices where they can have ownership, but are able to pay towards their equity, which is where this model really becomes more important and quite timely as we come out of this recession. I think price point and affordability is going to be challenged for a lot of people. So I think there are some positives. We definitely share the concern about parking impacts and what a high density neighborhood can do. But I think we can improve those through better regulations surrounding overall development appeal, right? Nice looking buildings, landscaping and all those. So we're taking the right steps as we get this opportunity to look at the regulation. It is not literally a developer coming in saying, make this a permitted use. We've gone through looking at all aspects of the development to satisfy some of these concerns that everybody has within administration and council. I don't know how much of that answers your question, but.
No, and I appreciate exactly what you're saying. And I feel like we have tried to learn from previous pilot projects that we've done in and around the city. I've actually lived in all different levels. I've lived in a condo, I lived in a duplex, I live in a single family home. And so I appreciate that step and process to have that mix. I just know that we have had maybe some challenges that I would like to avoid going forward. So I I would feel more comfortable if there was some verbiage to capture not all 14 foot. And I would just like to make a comment, whoever did the map, there's two different kinds of measurements. There's feet and meters, and it's a little, just, it's not deceptive, but it's tricky. So I would prefer to see verbiage that captures that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Don't have a queue. I think I had Councillor Stevenson next on the queue, and then Councillor McKenzie, and then Councillor Oldham.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to Mr. Nalapde. Can you explain the math to me? Like why the 4 foot difference? Why not 16 feet or 15 feet? Why did it go from 18 to 14? Is it a construction thing?
That has actually come from the development industry. Like they've provided plans to, when you look at this, the plan of a unit, there are certain dimensions required to say accommodate a living room, furniture, and what may be. I'm not going to speculate too much on it because that's not my sort of area of kind of expertise. It's something that the development industry does. But we did look at a few site plans. If a unit is too narrow, it's just not going to function. So we look at a functioning site unit plan, like a floor plan, and that's how this decision was made. But I think the developers made a point that for every 5 traditional 18-foot units, you can get a 6th one. So there is that desire to increase the density target a little bit that is also playing into it. And so what is that fine balance? It's a question of just that design exercise resulting in these forms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just really quickly, standard is the development industry typically builds in 2-foot segments. So it's going to be 14, 16, 18, 20. You won't see 15, 17.
Right. Yeah, I guess I was just curious why it went from 4 feet instead of like a 2-foot difference. But if they're trying to get the additional housing units.
It's always the front footage that's supposed to, footage, and the depth of the lot is less valuable. So that's unless you can, that's why you sometimes will see very large pie-shaped lots because it's dead land.
Kind of like mine. So I guess like I do appreciate that we are looking for different types of housing and we're moving this way. I was against the 0 lot line, but I think we had very valid reasons. I do think this is considerably different because we're not asking people to share land. But the one way we did approach 0 lot lines is we did the pilot. So we allowed Greenbury to do the pilot. Is that something we would consider instead of just changing the R2 for everyone? Would we say, okay, Qualico has come forward and obviously wants to do it in Easton and then Copperhaven. I don't know if that's Qualico as well, but could we limit it just to a pilot if we have a little discomfort right now?
Through Mr. Mayor, Councillor Stevenson, if the council makes that motion, that is definitely something we can consider and we can learn from those pilot projects. So absolutely, I think we do have a lot of tools to our disposal, looking at amendments in terms of design language or considering this as a pilot. That would be a good balance to allow some development, learn from it, and then revise regulation. Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Because like I think a lot of us over the last year we've learned a lot about this, and just with the project that we were working with Nate, just looking at alternative opportunities for housing and what that looks like in the future and what people are looking for. I think this is a good way to go for sure. But I share some of the concerns that my colleagues have as well in terms of the parking and how this eventually all plays out. Just knowing I live in a higher density neighborhood as well, and you can have all the intention in the world to have the right type of parking, but everyone parks out on the streets and, they use God knows what for, in their garages and stuff. So I do support this. I have a little bit of hesitation, but I wouldn't want to prevent Qualico, especially because they are here tonight and we're hearing it is their neighborhood, that maybe this is a pilot opportunity so that we can maybe learn some lessons from this as well. So those are my comments for this reading. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor McKenzie, and then Councillor Oldham.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to administration. I have similar concerns as my fellow councillors have spoken about already, and I just want to commend Councillor Grocke on talking about the standards and stealing my thunder. Maybe you're listening to me always on my soapbox. That I actually ironically was what I wanted to talk to. And when you look at I know it's page 81 of our package and the conceptual site plan, where my concern is within what's in the property lines, I'm actually for, and I'm okay with row housing only having one stall out in the front for two row housing, because we are providing, you know, the resident themselves their own parking and that sort of thing in the garage. Where my concern is, this potential site plan that we're showing really doesn't, I don't believe, match our current standards, because outside of the property line, we then turn to our engineering design standards, which is not statutory plans, which is, you know, so I guess where I really struggle bringing this forward, it would be great for council to also see, yes, and you know what, within these neighborhoods, you know, you look at the boulevard and you're showing a beautiful, nice grass area out the front, as well as the trees. And then where my bigger concern is, it's not necessarily the number of parking stalls, it also becomes the actual street width. And if you have parking on both sides of the street, then you're limiting that whole ability for the fire trucks to come through and proper movement of other vehicles. So it would be really nice to see what the actual engineering design standards for the roadways within this type of development area was. I actually am in total favor of the land use, and I don't feel that you know, it needs to be a pilot project. Zero lot line, I'm not in favor of. That is a single unit, but row housing is row housing, and I think that what they've got here is a really neat concept. Where I have often talked about with the city of Spruce Grove is I do feel there's a disconnect between our standards and making sure that is happening. The other concern that I do have is with, and Councillor Stevenson had talked about this during the public hearing, is the cutting of the grass. And ironically, for me, the grass in the back is okay because that's where your garage is and that's where you got your lawnmower. It's actually the grass in the front that is the problem for the middle units. And then on top of it, outside of the property line, we're throwing in a boulevard there where the resident would be responsible for doing that as well. So, you know, I am in support of this moving forward. I would just really like to see our engineering department as well as our development and planning department working together to making sure that what is outside of the property lines makes sense also for the development. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go to Councillor Oldham. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, question on, I want to follow up from Councillor McKenzie on the street widths. That was a question that I had. If we have on-street parking on both sides, can you help us to understand, have we changed the requirements for street width, or what would it be? I wasn't able to ascertain through the diagrams exactly, and I was looking for clarification.
Through Mr. Mayor, Councillor Oldham, no, this discussion hasn't gone into street widths. Councillor McKenzie was quite right that beyond the property line, it does default to the city's engineering standards. What we do know is that they are looking at the design standard where there is a street separated sort of sidewalk, which means there is the road carriageway and there's the landscaping of trees and then the sidewalk, right? So it does have some softening of the edges and whatnot. But we looked at the standard cross section that can accommodate parking on both sides, and that standard that we have right now does allow for fire trucks and all these vehicles to move. Having said that, there may be value in kind of going back and making sure that we are answering all of the questions that some of the other councillors are raising. And so I will take this back to the development and planning group to make sure we are answering all these questions.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up to that, I think about the municipal services, and someone had maybe mentioned snow removal. To me, snow removal is not affected by the number of units or whether 100 feet of frontage is divided by 7 or 8, but I might be missing something. Can you help me understand if snow removal is affected by the number of units based on the frontage?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. I appreciate that. I'm in favor of this as a model. I appreciate my council colleagues' concerns. I do think that we can't wait for it to be perfect before we move forward with it. There's going to be concerns. I live in an R1 area that has front attached garages, and that creates concerns for parking because you can't park in front of other people's garages. So there's parking concerns all over the city, and people aren't using their garages as maybe they should. And I think that we sometimes we can get hung up on the parking, but there's going to be parking concerns regardless of the model and how the area is built. So I don't personally get hung up on that, although I do appreciate the concerns of the fire and garbage pickup. Those have to be the municipal parts of it have to be taken care of. I also don't want to become too regulatory. I think that we need to open up the affordability, the availability for different housing products. And I support this moving forward, although I understand from hearing all my colleagues, there may be some amendments and some things to check up on and double check on, but I am supportive of this. I look forward to supporting it in second reading with maybe holding off on third reading tonight from what I hear from my colleagues to make a few changes or get a bit of a better understanding, but I am supportive of this and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Oldham. I think everybody has had an opportunity to weigh in on it. And I just wanted to say to administration, I know you're recommending it, and I know Qualico has been at the table, and I'm going to say for more than 2.5 years working on some housing forums and some housing types in that area. I have to say, when I looked at first blush at the widths, I was at first blush, but when you look at it, it's like people, it's a density thing. It's like almost like a small apartment block where people don't have to pay a condo fee. That's a very attractive thing to not have to pay an extra $380 to $400 a month that many people have to. So a straight fee simple lot that's going to allow some affordability and stuff in the community. And recognizing with these higher densities comes, as everybody on council indicated, some issues that we look at in regards to on-street parking and that. But I think at the end of the day, this council has looked at and has embraced conversations even with NAIT students on new housing forms for our community. And I like the model actually when I looked at the actual model. And but I would also make sure or request a similar type. And I know we shouldn't be setting development standards, but when builders are going to build it, have some nice architectural frontage like they do in Greenbury and some of our newer neighborhoods. But I'm certainly supportive of second reading, and then we can have we can do some refining on third reading. I guess the one thing I would just caution, because this is something that I recognized on pilot projects in the city, is that on one particular pilot project, I'm going to use one of our developers has a significant distinct advantage over other developers in regards to the development of zero lot line, because it's taking a long time to build out, but he's the only one that's allowed to build that housing type. So I just use a little bit of caution in regards to saying this neighborhood gets this one doesn't, or this one doesn't. But we may maybe have the opportunity to look at how many of these forms that maybe that might be an option of how many we allow in the city. Maybe we start off with allowing 16 of these to be built in the city or whatever. I don't know. But I just want to use a little caution in regards to having certain areas get certain types of housing and stuff. But I appreciate the work that's been going on this, and I know it's been a long process, and look forward to supporting this to see it through to the next step. So with that, I'll call the question on the motion. This is for second reading. Call the question on the motion. Those in favor? Opposed, if any? Okay, we have 5 in favor and 1 opposed. Okay, thank you very much. Could I get a motion, please, for third reading? Sorry, 6, you're correct. 6 in favor and 1 opposed. Could I get a motion, please, for third reading? Councillor Oldham.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move that third reading be given to bylaw C-1096-19, text amendment R2 district fee simple row housing.
Okay, thank you very much. And just back to administration, in regards to some of the comments that in regards to council. And I just wanted to add in regards to uses of garages and stuff like that. And I know it was a suggestion, but I don't believe that you had indicated there wouldn't be any tools for us to specifically. I mean, people all over the city use these use garages for a variety of reasons, right? But at any rate, go ahead with your presentation for third reading if there's anything further to add.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I didn't have a separate presentation. It was the same presentation that I would repeat. So if Council wants me to repeat the presentation, otherwise I can answer any questions.
I don't think we need to re-see the presentation unless Council has any other further questions for clarity. I just have one question to administration. Mrs. Armstrong, I know you've worked in regards to a lot of the zero lot line and stuff. Can you weigh in on some of, about the work that you've worked with Qualico on this particular housing type and what that could do for?
Certainly, I think that Pankaj has done an awesome job tonight looking at the advantage of this product. Certainly in the backyards where it's a single parking stall outside and then the parking stall inside, it does leave a little bit more of a land base that what could be grassed or to gravel or stone or something. That area is where snow can be stored from the driveway when it's shoveled in the winter. The garbage bins can be stored there. So that sort of thing adds a bit of an advantage that some of the other products that are currently available don't exist. And because they are a rear garage, then the front street is all open for off-site parking. So I do see that there are some advantage of this product over certainly some other products, potentially like the GPL and so on.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Acker, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question, and I hope that this style of housing is going to be conveniently located to green space, because I imagine at this price point, you're looking at probably starting out young families with kids with no rear yard. They're going to need some green space to run to. And time again, I see these, and we're usually placing these across the street of an arterial to the playground, which is a dangerous setting when we're talking young families living in row housing with no yards that need to get to the playgrounds. So hopefully there's some considerations on placements within the neighborhoods and ensuring there's adequate green space nearby.
Yeah.
And then I think, further just to the discussion on parking, because I know it's a challenge, and I know we've been asked questions on existing developments that are higher density of neighborhoods wanting to have their own neighborhood parking permits because they're having issues and they're fighting with their neighbors. And I want to try and avoid future homeowners in these styles from having to deal with that. So when we open it up and look at standards, there's opportunities for additional parking near green spaces or something to allow visitors to come and visit family and people coming in these neighborhoods, because it's a challenge today, and as we densify, it's going to continue to be a challenge, and we need to find a consolidated solution here. So there's just some ideas, but those are all my only concerns. Oh, one question: when I look at the overall map, what's the surface use? I know we talk about storm sewer and drainage, and is there any concerns here with, looks like most of the lot itself is covered in building or driveway? Is there a concern with drainage, and would these properties have a sump pump, and would the discharge be to the alley and not over top of the public sidewalks? Those will be some questions on this design, if we know.
Through you, yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. A lot of those questions, Mr. Acker, it's premature to know what some of that is going to look like. Those are the kinds of questions that we would ask when we actually have a development proposal in front of us, look at the capabilities of the soil, the overall design and density of the application that comes in.
Okay, I'm just asking because we've had challenges in the past, so hopefully we can correct it. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, understood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Nalavde. Just wanted to, one of the things that the council would consider is that this very type of housing that can create a density target of 80 density units per hectare allows for more broader development adjacent to it as well. So if you have a neighborhood, Ms. Armstrong, you're nodding your head because it's like if we could get more high density development into certain aspects of a neighborhood, it allows for a broader range of housing choices to develop to meet those aspirational targets. And we're just this evening agreed as a council to, or we're going to be accepting the new municipal development plan standards for the Edmonton Metro region. So it's an opportunity for us to have a housing choice that is. Did Councilor McKenzie, were you wanting to talk? No. Housing choices that would help us achieve those aspirational targets and provide a diverse range of housing product in a new neighborhood. So anyway.
Yeah, certainly. I think that Mr. Nalavde has really touched on this already, in that our flexible zoning program allows for an interesting product type mix in either of our residential land use districts. And so that provides the opportunity for a developer to potentially mix this product in with wider townhouse development, semi-detached and single detached. So hopefully developers will take that to heart and really create a nice mix rather than too much of the same type and size of dwelling.
Yeah. Councillor Grilke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. But Mrs. Armstrong, there's nothing stopping them from not putting that mix together. And that's my fear of the verbiage not being captured, is that I think in Qualico, or the gentleman's presentation, Bladen's presentation, he even said if we did all 14 feet, we would be at 80 units per hectare. So there's nothing in the bylaw that's stopping that. And that's what I would not want to support at this time. So my fear is if I vote in favor of third reading, there's no going back from that.
If through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can just respond from a broader planning perspective, and the areas that are under development, Qualico is developing Easton, under their area structure plan, they have already identified areas that they're going to look at for the medium to higher density type developments. Those areas are not large, they're fairly small. So if they were going to go beyond the areas that they've already identified for R2 development, then they would have to do an amendment to the area structure plan as well, which is a bit cumbersome. So I think that the planning system already will create some of those limitations. And I would expect that the marketplace will also play in, that the market's going to demand more than just this product type moving forward. So I think that we have to have some trust in the process and the system, and hopefully that the developers won't just look at this as the only product type they're going to try to sell within the R2 areas.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the best part, I think we've seen some of our developers that use a unique style where they have a mix of range of, like R2 density, and then they mix it in with the R1, and and I think they want to provide that range of options. But and I do appreciate the feedback, Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Nevelat. I'll get it right. But I just wanted to say thank you very much for your presentation. I don't see any other questions or comments on there, and looking forward to seeing potentially, hopefully, a new product type in Spruce Grove that will, and we've heard about the requirement for UDI to look at new housing types in our city as well too. So with that, I'll call the question on the motion for third reading. Okay, that's 6-4. Opposed, if any? Just one, okay. Or how did you do it? Okay, and one opposed. Councillor Roth's opposed. Okay, thank you very much. And And thank you very much for the presentation on that. It's an interesting challenge with, with the current situation as well. So let's go to, we're going to go actually to a washroom break. And I've had seen some thumbs up. Our clerk has asked if we could just take about a 7-minute recess to allow a little bit of a comfort break, and we'll be back right after that. So just like to call a short recess. Thank you.
I'm not able to unmute my video.
Okay. I'd like to call, thank you everyone for joining back. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. And if I could please get a motion for 10B. Councillor Grilke.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that second reading be given to bylaw C-1102-19 Municipal Development Plan Bylaw Amendment as amended.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Grilke. Mr. Lavisheur, the MDP amendment, second reading. Who's presenting?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This evening, as similar to the public hearing for C-1102-19, we have Mr. Pushko here to provide the necessary details for this second reading.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lavisheur. Mr. Pushko, we have the MDP amendment that's going to bring us in line with the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, I will just quickly share my screen. Okay, it says it's sharing. So yeah, so this is bylaw C-1102-19 MDP amendment, Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board update. So as discussed earlier in the public hearing, this is a bylaw amendment to the municipal development plan to update to become consistent with the new Edmonton Regional Growth Plan. As a quick overview of what we discussed in the public hearing, this bylaw proposes to make changes required to bring the MDP into conformance with the growth plan and make some minor maintenance type changes that take advantage of this update opportunity. Uh-oh. Okay, so just a listing of the update changes for review quickly. So as identified in the regional context statement approximately a year and a half ago, there were changes required to bring our municipal development plan into conformance with the growth plan. So with the name change of the region, the capital region usage has been changed to the Edmonton Metropolitan Region in text, figures, and definitions. We identify that the city is within the Edmonton the metropolitan area policy tier of the Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Structure. We add a policy encouraging a 10% increase of residential dwelling units in built-up urban areas, including established neighborhoods, and add a definition for built-up urban areas. So that is a slight change from the first reading that we talked about in the public hearing, that there's been an amendment to add built-up urban areas and that new definition. There's an increase in new area structure plan minimum greenfield density to 35 dwelling units per net residential hectare. We've added a policy to pursue achieving an aspirational density of 100 dwelling units per net residential hectare in the city center area. We update policy for amendment referrals to the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board for a regional evaluation framework review, and support policy for the Edmonton International Airport, and policy requiring architectural impact assessments. The maintenance type updates that we are taking are proposing to take advantage of this opportunity is removal of references to note that no annexations are required during the life of the municipal development plan, updating the existing and future land use maps, and adjusting the gateway lands terminology to Westwood lands. So planning and development supports second reading of this proposed bylaw as amended, and we note that after second reading, this will be referred to the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board for their review and approval prior to third reading if council approves second reading tonight. I'll end my presentation there and be available for questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I just had one question. I think it was asked a little bit earlier in regards to encouraging the increase of density of 10% in established neighborhoods. Would that be neighborhoods under development right now? For example, I'll use Copperhaven and or Greenbury, Kenton. Are those neighborhoods, Mr. Pushko, are they part of that? Or are they more referring to older established neighborhoods like Woodhaven and Grove Meadows and such?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, to your question. So it is more the older ones. That was part of the amendment for second reading here, is just defining when that date is. And that date is December 31st of 2016. So for all lands subdivided prior to that date, there will be that expectation that we'll look for opportunities to aspire to add the 10% of additional density.
Okay. So that brings us and that basically realigns with that we're currently at around 25 up to about 35. Or that isn't even, no, that's not even quite accurate either, is it?
Yeah, so these areas, Mr. Mayor, are generally parts of the city that are developed and probably not under area structure plans anymore, largely. Okay. So they have varying density back to, a long time ago when density wasn't an issue. So there's probably some fair opportunity for adding this amount of density. But like I said, part of our requirements for the getting on board with the Edmonton Metropolitan Board is understanding where our density sits and then looking for opportunities and coming up with strategies and plans to perhaps make amendments to the land use bylaw to, make this aspirational density understood and possible.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's a little clearer now to me. Yeah, I wasn't exactly clear on that. I am now. I think the neighborhood I live in Woodhaven actually is around 17 units per hectare currently, but that's when, like you say, the older neighborhoods that have that broader lots and stuff. Are there any other questions or comments in regards to second reading? Councillor Oldham.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mr. Pushko, the 10% increase, is that regardless of the current density? Mayor Houston just mentioned that Woodhaven may be at 17 units and, another development, Deer Park, I don't know what that's at, or Stoneshire. So are we being asked, or are we approving something that is 10% regardless, or is it 10% or up to 25? Or can you clarify that for me as to what we're signing up for here?
Sure, I can attempt to do that. So yes, the understanding is that this is a 10% increase from a baseline. So we will be doing some work to understand which different neighborhoods stand where and what potential there is to add new density with the expectation that, we would be trying to achieve the 10% aspirationally over time.
Great segue into my next question. Your comment was over time. What timeline is on this? We use that words like aspirational and working towards. Is there a set timeline that we are expected to kind of at least either have a plan in place or complete the density target?
Yes, through to the mayor to the question. Yeah, I think that we are certainly looking at a longer term situation here where we're trying to affect change and add density. There's not a defined time, but there are reporting requirements where we're going to establish the baseline and start reporting how we are making progress in this regard to meet the EMRB requirements and satisfy them that we're aspiring to do this. So I think that's how I would characterize it at this time.
Thank you. In a neighborhood like Mill Grove, just to pick one, or Woodhaven, other than infill, what strategies would we require or use to get to that 10%?
Yeah, so I think that the strategies are infill, there's redevelopment where parcels in older areas can be replaced, and some of them don't need to be currently. So maybe 20 years and then there's a parcel that comes up that can be redeveloped, and there will be some land use bylaw options that aren't available today that would allow that to presumably cause an uptake in new density. And then there's also just sort of stuff that amendments that we can do to sort of allow existing developments that aren't going to change to, maybe add suites or, become duplexes or different types of housing forms that may be possible to add units, which is the goal.
Thank you for that. My concern is that passing something now is going to hamstring the council of the day in 2029 or 2032, where a neighborhood that has been designed for low density, has existed for 50 or 60 years in low density, is then forced or bound by an agreement to change in an unnatural way because we've set a target. And I understand the garden suites and the garage suites and whatnot. But I'm a little bit nervous to kind of sign this off, knowing that the challenges that we've just had with the downtown redevelopment, if we go to it, again, I'll pick on Mill Grove, but it could be a number of them, and say we're now going to allow infill, and this is the number we're going to have to do, the impact that has to the residents that have been there, and that how bound are we to all of this over time?
Through to the councillor's question. So I think we are bound by our participation in the Edmonton Metro Region Board to attempt to do this, is what the expectation would be through the region. Certainly other communities are ahead of us on matters like this, where infill has become hot topic, for instance. What I can say to that is the planning department would be looking for strategies and ways to make this density happen while respecting the existing neighborhoods. And so these would also come back to councils at the time to review our work and to contextualize and make choices about some of the suggestions that we've come up to aspire to this new density.
Great, I appreciate that. Last question. 8.3.1.11 is the general statement for supporting the international airport. If we approve that statement included in this, does it mean anything for us out of a statement of support? Are we bound to anything? Are there any potential financial implications? That one kind of sticks out to me as, if it's a value statement and we think it's important, that's easy. But are we attaching ourselves to any future commitment through that statement?
Through to the councillor's question. So that was identified in our regional context statement as the fact that we didn't have anything that supported the Edmonton International Airport because of our distance from there. And so I would characterize it as being sort of a regional support at this standard. I'm not aware of any commitments that might be required under transportation planning for the region, but my understanding is that from the regional context undertaking is that it's more an expression of support.
Okay, that's perfect. That's what I assumed and hoped, so I appreciate that answer. That's all, Mayor. Thank you very much, Mr. Pushko. Appreciate your work. Mayor, you're still muted, I think.
There you go. Pushing the wrong mute button. So anyway, Councillor Acker, you had a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it's similar to what Councillor Oldham had said. When I first read this document and the proposed aspirational goal of increasing density in established neighborhoods, my heart beat a little faster, because we all know that the minute you're talking about any changes to an established neighborhood, you're going to have a lot of concern. So I'm appreciative of administration's position that we're going to be strategic, we're going to be respective, we're going to make sure that any increases in established neighborhoods make sense for the neighborhood and will reflect the support of the neighbors. Because I think if you just say we're going 10% up across the board in all communities, you're going to have a lot of nervous residents out there worried what that means. So, and I think I asked a question during the public hearing that we will be looking back into our land use zoning and how this might apply and what are the tools that we could put in place and what regulations and restrictions to bring a lot of comfort to our residents. But your explanation of suites and garden suites, garage suites may be the way we can get there. So I appreciate that, but I do have a follow-up question, and it's on the new item 5123 talking about agricultural impact assessments. And I wonder, are we going to develop a map to identify within our corporate boundaries what these agricultural lands might look like if we want to ensure we're keeping them together until they're developed? I don't know if I've ever seen a map on agricultural lands within our boundaries, but we have a statement in there, so I was just curious.
Yes, through to the question. So yeah, like this is a new requirement under the EMRB that agricultural assessments be reviewed, and the idea here is to maintain or to discourage the pre-mature development and fragmentation of development lands. So largely our lands are planned currently. And so I don't see this coming up for us except for maybe in new annexation areas. And those areas are sort of at this point longer term. So, you know, it's likely that we would have those sorts of studies happen then to establish any recommendations that come out of that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Acker. And I think the one thing that is in the regulation is that we're encouraging it to happen. I think Mr. Pushko also mentioned, if you look at what's happening in Edmonton, it's a very popular product. And my question to Mr. Pushko on a popular product that we see in Edmonton, they're called skinnies, where they build two 28-foot homes on a 60-foot lot, like we have 60-foot lots in Broxton and Brookwood. I think recognizing the value to those homeowners, the property values are going to be increased by this kind of this kind of regulation in regards to what they could do with it. But is there, if we had a type of development like that in a mature neighborhood, would that have to come back to administration and council? You know,
yes, Mr. Mayor.
What I mean by that, so go ahead. You know what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think I've got your question here. Yeah, so City of Edmonton is a good example. Skinny homes, that was a matter that went to City Council for changing, I believe, the subdivision regulations that allowed subdivision down to 25-foot wide lots that allowed single-family dwellings to be built on that. So that did go to council. It had a full review and support of their council as to an appropriate standard within the City of Edmonton to, you know, add density. And I think that might have predated this discussion, though.
Okay, that was just one form of housing type that could be utilized with this, or as another example. But just thanks for the clarification. Okay, thank you very much. Don't see any other further questions or comments from council unless anybody has one. Put your hand up. No, don't see any. So with that, this is for second reading. I'll call the question on the motion for second reading. Okay, that's been carried. Thank you very much. Unanimous. Okay, moving forward to 10C. Could I get a second reading, please, for 10C? Go ahead.
I make that motion, Mr. Mayor, that second reading be given to C-1104-19 2019 Land Use Bylaw Review Amendments.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Acker. Mr. Lavoisier, who's our presenter on this one?
I'm trying. Oh, there we go. My video was taking its time. Once again, Mr. Mayor, we have Mr. Nalavde to make the presentation on this item.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Nalavde. Mr. Nalavde.
Sorry, for some reason my video is not starting, but I will share my screen.
Okay.
There we go.
We saw you.
My apologies for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, once again. Administration has brought forward this request for decision seeking Council's second reading of bylaw C-1104-19, which is the annual update of the bylaw C82412 land use bylaw. Planning and Development undertakes an annual review and update of the land use bylaw to continually improve regulations and ensure the document stays current. The purpose of this update is to fine-tune regulations, provide enhanced clarity, and fix inconsistencies. A detailed presentation was provided earlier this evening during the public hearing of this bylaw. Largely for the year 2019, the update focuses on 6 key areas. These areas are in front of us on the screen. We have taken a view to the future and improved our regulations, fixed consistencies, but also made some changes to height regulations, for example, which can help us attract new developments that cater to the seniors housing market or assisted living market. And we have made some other regulatory changes to accommodate those. The proposed bylaw amendments were advertised as per the requirements of the MGA. The proposed bylaw amendments incorporate comments resulting from consultation with other city departments, as well as consultation with the Urban Development Institute, UDI, Spruce Grove chapter, and the amendments have received their support. Finally, administration supports this bylaw. And so at this point, I would like to conclude my presentation and answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go to my, if you get rid of that, I can go to my full screen and see my council. Are there any questions or comments in regards to this for second reading? Councillor Stevenson, go ahead.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Nalavde, I have a question. It's on page 338, section 6. It's talking about accessory buildings. And so it looks like we're changing the minimum from 2 meters down to 1 meter. And then number 13 talks about where it's an unenclosed building is unattached to the front of the principal building. What about the back if it's in their backyard?
Those changes are really made to deal with the front entrance porch of a house. So we are specifically crafting regulations to allow that kind of accommodate that. It's really not about anything else. So that's the frontage issue. And the second change you spoke about is with regards to gazebos and other accessory buildings that people build, they want to build them closer to the structure, and there really isn't much of an issue. So it would allow, say, a small gazebo or a larger deck or a small sheds. And we don't have a safety code concern, which is why we are able to allow the lower separation distance.
So they're 2 separate ones referring to 2 very different things.
Yes.
So when you're talking about, okay, so then for number 13, unenclosed building, that you're talking about a porch versus like, let's say a pergola or something like that.
That's right. That's right.
Okay,
Like just an
perfect.
entrance coming out. Yeah.
Great, thank you for that one. Number on page 339, number 9, we're talking about driveway extensions. So it says driveway extensions located over city boulevards shall be made of concrete only. And is that only to limit to the width of your actual driveway? Like you can't go out and put cement all across the boulevard in front of your property. It's just to match, I'm assuming, the driveway width?
Yes. Yes. There are a couple of components to that. One is
Okay.
the width of the driveway, and that is dictated by how much total concrete can you have on your site. And we have separate regulations to say in a single detached neighborhood, you must have at least 30% as permeable so that water percolation can take place. So that is one guiding parameter. And
Okay.
what we are specifically saying is that people who are building these driveways should not be building it with other materials. Like there are some examples where the material is almost like a hard rubber. And what happens is with that, when the crew is doing the maintenance, they may damage that site. And it's just a hazard and cost that the city has to bear. So we are making it very clear that as far as the boulevard component is concerned, you must build it with concrete. So there aren't these ongoing challenges with maintenance.
Okay, do we have examples of, like, would you ever have to build your own boulevard extension to begin with? Or is this usually just like the replacement of an existing concrete boulevard to your driveway?
It could be both. I mean, even a new development could say, I want to build everything in brick, for example, right?
I see.
And that could create a challenge. So a regulation does not speculate whether it's before or after. I think we just want to make sure we don't have that condition at all.
Okay, perfect. And then my last question for this one is on page 341. It's number 14. It's about the election signs. So it says you can't have election signs up, but I'm guessing that's on city property. The question is, like, if you have private property and you have your own fence, are you limited to just the election period to put up signs?
I think the regulation in general does not make that distinction at this point. So whether it's on private or public property, the regulation simply says somebody coming forward for a sign permit for election must abide by these rules. We don't make the distinction. If they are putting the sign on public property, they may need additional permitting. But as far as the timeline is what this regulation deals with. And I believe last year we had an election period that spanned more than 28 days. And that is what triggered this regulation.
Okay. The only reason I was asking is because there's always been that discussion, even amongst other municipalities, of people putting up their election signs on private property and sort of going around the regulation. So I was just curious if this only pertained to city property where, as like we all ran in the election, obviously. So we were able to put our election signs on city property. So I just wanted to be clear if this is an overarching regulation or just specific to city property. So just curious more than anything.
My understanding it is overarching.
Overarching. Okay, great. Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Acker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few questions. The first one is section 12, and that's in dealing with the new ability for development permit applications dealing with hazardous substances and just giving some discretion to the development officer. How did we handle it today? Today, is there a problem? That's why we're adding this clause. Is it causing us difficulties? I'm more curious on what we're doing today that requires this.
I think we are clarifying that we have this regulation. Generally, a development officer does have some amount of discretion, but when they ask that question, we often have to answer the developer, where is it written in the regulation? And so as an application came forward, we dealt with that issue, and we felt that having a regulation would make it simple and clear for everyone, bring certainty to the issue, and save time and effort for everyone. So that is where we are going.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think me and Councillor Stevenson are on the same, because I have a couple of same questions. Under the 1 meter separation for accessory buildings, my curiosity was, is there any concerns from fire services? Because I know gazebos get placed, then they put their fire pit in there, and then, or they do something under this building, or they store chemicals in a shed that's an accessory. Is there any concerns with that?
So that would fall under safety code review, and currently we do not have a concern. We have similar regulations in many other cities. And as lots are becoming more compact, people's desire to have decks or gazebos or what may be is starting to encroach on that space. So we're just facilitating what is an industry standard.
Okay, perfect. Next question, along the lines with the sign bylaws for elections. And I'm just curious, just in my experience opening up to a set time at noon, I think previously it was like midnight, which allowed, sign crews from federal, provincial, municipal elections to get out when the roads aren't busy. It's a little safer for volunteers. Now, if we're putting in noon, I foresee an issue with traffic congestion, maybe a safety issue with volunteers out there putting up signs for any of the elections. Is there any consideration made on why it's at noon and not at 12:01 a.m. following nomination day?
Through Mr. Mayor, Councillor, I honestly have to admit we have not had that detailed conversation. But with this knowledge, the city does have some opportunity to look at conditions that could say not during traffic time or peak time or something like that. But having heard your concern, it gives us that opportunity to investigate. And as this is an annual update, and we will make notes, and the next attempt at this, we will investigate further.
Okay, yeah, please make a note. I believe it's probably a lot safer for volunteers to be doing that non-peak time. Noon might be a little scary. The next one, the concern, I have a little bit of concern when we're talking increasing height for R2. And my only concern is, and I know we touched on it during the public hearing, is it's when that transition between the R2 4-story building to a single family bungalow right behind it. And that's, you know, it might just be the adjacent zoning. Can you alleviate some of that concern that this isn't going to be an issue with shadowing and shading and, you know, just ticking off people that have bought their single family on one side of the road, right behind them might be a different zone. That's where I'm concerned with.
I'm going to answer this in a slightly different way. When we look at our newer neighborhoods, a lot of the developments that we are now getting are almost 2 or 3 stories tall. And that's just a result from a compact lot, right? That's shrinking sideways, so it's going taller. We have to recognize that this regulation that allows up to 4 stories is already there right now, right? We are making improvements so that we are not just allowing apartments up to 4 stories, but we are allowing different uses. And really the angle we are coming from is a seniors facility, for example. Most of them would be 4 to 5 stories. We have an application in the city, Vantage Living, that is doing that. And so we are changing regulations so that these future developments don't have to go through amendments. We are opening the envelope to accommodate them. That is really the goal of it. Thirdly, the current regulation said you could do 4-story apartments, but if you were a townhome, you were only allowed up to 3 stories. And it was difficult to understand why that difference. So we are trying to simplify the regulation. We are trying to make sure that transition is maintained, that is a core principle of this regulation. But beyond that, if there was an existing bungalow, then you also can imagine that that bungalow may redevelop to a 2-story or something if it has to go through redevelopment. So I think we do have regulations that currently do not impact single detached negatively because the height difference is not that much. If we do start seeing that pressure, then administration will look to using other tools, such as the shadow study, for example, to make sure that these are not negatively impacted.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Acker. Councillor Oldham.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Mr. Nalavde. I appreciate your depth of wisdom and your answers. It's appreciated. Question for you. There's in the reading between assisted living facility and then designated assisted living facility, there's a difference in saying that there's a 2-bedroom limit for an assisted living facility, but no such limit for a designated assisted living facility. Can you help me understand why we would have a 2-bedroom limit for one and not for the other? That doesn't, I don't know if that seems to be in our purview.
Through Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Oldham, thank you for the comment. And these definitions are provincial definitions. And a key difference between assisted living and designated assisted living is that you may have people with more severe conditions within designated assisted living. So are these people at a point where they need larger units, or are they at a point where they need more services? And so the developments start to change. These definitions are really provincial definitions. We haven't tweaked them much because they receive support from the province when they start developing and so on and so forth. So assisted living may have many people who need a smaller amount of assistance with their day-to-day living, and therefore they may be able to live as a couple or need more space, have more pets, and so on and so forth. So that is the only logical answer in my view, is that as it moves to a designated assisted living, that some of those spaces change because the need of the residents is quite different. In my view, a lot of the developments that do this actually use a combination of both. So maybe a wing of the building may be assisted and another wing may be designated assisted living. So I think there's a lot of evolution happening with that. And so that's the goal of the definitions. Supporting that, we have also made some parking regulations, and I know that's not part of your question. But the reason for doing that is some of these people, as they move up the designated assisted living facility, don't really need or have the need for driving or parking as much. So developer is able to build these sites more efficiently. Maybe there's more open space on site for people to get down and enjoy that amenity. So I think that's broadly where these definitions are coming from. We looked at other cities to kind of look at regulations so that we are at par and competitive in terms of attracting and accommodating these developments. So that's really the approach we have here.
Great, I appreciate
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, very, very well. I noticed the difference between 0.5 parking spots for the assisted living and then the designated that didn't have any parking. So that's all part of that. One of the concerns I always have, and it kind of creeps up in a few areas here, is that we're putting forth an amendment that is going to negatively impact people who maybe built something or did something when we had a different bylaw, and when it's retroactively applied, that there'll be someone in breach unintentionally, and that will create some confusion and maybe some extra cost for them. And an example, and so the question is, I don't think so, but does the statement on assisted living facilities or designated assisted living facilities for that matter, put any current development in breach? Are there any developments out there right now that would have a 3-bedroom for assisted living facility, for example, and now we put this forward and all of a sudden they're breaching our bylaw unintentionally?
We do not have any such negative impacts that would cause a development to be non-conforming. These are new definitions, these are new uses, and they're in addition to what we already have. So if a existing use was permitted under a certain use within the land use bylaw, that would not be impacted. This would really open doors for new developments. Now, an old development may come back and say, we have some underutilized portion of our site, and we would like to take advantage of these new regulations to add density. That would make it a very viable condition for them. So these are in no way going to cause any such negative impacts.
Perfect. And then my other question with that same concept in mind is in section 9, driveway extensions located over city boulevard shall be made of concrete only. This was, I think, brought up by Councillor Stevenson as well. If that will be applied retroactively, I know for sure there are going to be people that will be in breach of that now. So I remember several months ago, Mr. Stenner from Public Works came to council and talked about us putting in this kind of a bylaw, and I believe stating at the time that this wasn't like a seek and find where we'll have people out in the city looking for these. It will be more of a complaint basis. So a couple parts to this question. Number one, how are we going to maybe communicate this to residents? How are we going to deal with people that have in good faith put a non-concrete in these spaces? And is it going to be complaint based, or what's going to be the process to move this through over time?
I will be a bit careful with my answer on this. I think there's a few approaches. So you're right. This regulation, after its passing, will make it very clear for developments of today and tomorrow that this regulation was in place. If we have a situation where during maintenance some damage is being caused to an existing area, the city has some amount of discretion on how we go about enforcing. And I think the planning department always discusses this. What is the best outcome for the city? And we generally approach it that way. So I think the city would have to use some discretion with regards to existing areas as to how we enforce and whatnot. But the city does have some discretion. And I'm not suggesting we use it. I'm saying that tools are available to have these discussions when some of these issues come up. For new areas, we're making it very clear that we want to avoid this problem going forward.
Yeah, I'm happy to approve this for second reading. It is a concern of mine, not only for the short term, but for the medium to long term, how that gets applied. And I'm glad to hear that there is some discretion, and then how that plays out will certainly be something that we may hear about down the road. So thank you for your great answers. I appreciate your time, and I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much. And you know what? One of the things that we start to realize is that the land use bylaw is always a work in progress, because every time, and council will recall the issue that we had in regards to people putting a large stone product along their property lines that would create issues for snow clearing and such in alleyways and all. And you know, the change in regulations reflects some of those changes, requirements, and discussions we have. So thanks for all the questions and comments. Supportive of this for sure. I'll just call the question on the motion. Okay, thank you very much. That's been carried. Could I get a motion, please, for third reading? Councillor Roth.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move third reading to C110419 2019 land use bylaw review amendments.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Any further questions, Mr. Nalavde? You've pretty much covered off on it, and you're very knowledgeable and quick on responses in regards to questions. So just wanted to give a shout out to your boss and city manager. You're doing a very good job, as well as everybody. Not
Thank
just-
you. Thank you for that engaging conversation.
Okay. We'll keep you hopping, I'll guarantee you that. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the motion for third reading. Okay, thanks very much. That's been carried. Could I get a motion, please, under, could I get a motion actually from Councillor Stevenson under 10D?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that second reading be given to bylaw C-1114-20, 2020 Business Improvement Area Tax Bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Bourget. Looks
Yes,
like Louise Frostad is going to take this one.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Over to Louise.
Mr. Mayor, this evening you have before you the bylaw that allows council to provide a business improvement area tax based on the budget that was approved by the City Center Business Association. We're asking for second and third reading on this bylaw this evening, and then the following one will establish the rate setting for that. So I can entertain questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments in regards to Councillor Roth? You need to sit a little bit forward because you're disappearing on the screen. You're just like a ghost. There we go. Okay, any questions or comments in regards to this? Councillor Acker, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for those maybe listening, to clarify, the amount being requested was done by the City Center Business Association, and we're just using this as a facility for them to, fund this money, right? So this wasn't something the city is instilling on them. This is something that was requested by the city. I just want to make sure if anyone's listening that is the process.
So, Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Acker, a few years ago, a group of business individuals banded together and decided to form a City Center Business Association. And by doing that, they form a budget each year and they decide on the amount that they're going to requisition from their members. And the city bills that amount on their behalf. The city actually pays that amount to them early in the year, so it's been paid already. And we will now collect it subsequently from their members.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Councillor Acker, for the question. I think it amounts to about $200 per business, I think, Councillor Stevenson or Mrs. Frostad. I think it's around $200 per business. And as you indicated, we collect it on behalf of the Business Association and we provide them a check or in advance as we did this year. But
Mr. Mayor, that's correct. It's based on the amount of assessment of businesses in that district, and we divide it by the 32,000, which was the overall budget. So this year it's coming in just a little under $200.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Roth.
Thank you, Mayor Houston. I recall asking this question previously because I was aware of one or two, actually one business that was pushing back and was saying that they weren't going to support this. And I asked the question maybe a couple of years ago when this came up and was told that there was total buy-in, total compliance. Is that still the case?
Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Roth, there is the onus is on the City Center Business Association to collect the amounts. I believe they have difficulty collecting from some of their members, but it's my understanding that they have a majority of members who voted for and agreed to form this association and to issue this requisition. So I wouldn't say there's 100% compliance, but I would say that it's a majority that are willing to participate in this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, don't see anything further on the from council. So with that, I'll call a question on the motion. Okay, I just missed Councillor Oldham. Councillor Oldham, I didn't see your vote. Okay, thank you. Got it all. So that's been carried. Could I get a motion, please, for third reading? You can wrap this up. Third reading. Councillor
Make that
Acker, go
motion.
ahead.
I move that third reading be given to bylaw C-1114-20, 2020 Business Improvement Area Tax Bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions or comments in regards to third reading? Seeing none, I'll call a question on the motion. Okay, thank you very much. That's been carried. Okay, could I get a motion, please, for 10F? Councillor Grilke.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that second reading be given to bylaw C-1115-20, 2020 Business Improvement Area Tax Rate Bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much. It's for second reading. Mrs. Frostad.
So, Mr. Mayor, this is the rate setting bylaw, and as the RFD explains, there are multiple ways that the rate could be distributed to the members of the CCBA, but the decision has been made to do an equal distribution between all members with the belief and understanding that each member benefits in a similar way from the business association. So it's a straight division of the rate by the total cost of the requisition.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions or comments in regards to that explanation? Councillor Stevenson, then Councillor Grilke. Go ahead, Councillor Stevenson.
Great, thank you. Through you to Mrs. Frostad. You made a mention that the levy would be just under $200 this year, where the last few years it's been an even $200 because the number of businesses fluctuate. So normally it's 200. So I'm wondering why we've changed that versus just kept it at $200 per business.
So, Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Stevenson, the amount of the requisition is divided by the assessment for those properties. So if the assessment value changes and the requisition amount did not change, it's going to go down. So assessment obviously went up just slightly so that the rate went down slightly because the overall requisition is the same amount as the previous year.
Okay, so they're still going to try and collect the 32,000 is what we're saying.
That's correct.
Okay, but then if the number of businesses don't reopen, they could be short that amount of money because we based on existing assessment.
Mr. Mayor, we base it on active assessments, sites that are not vacant and or not non-taxable. So the taxable sites, there's 163 of the total sites that are taxable, and 16 of the occupied sites are exempt from taxation. So it's based on the active taxable sites.
Active taxable. Okay, and do we know what that rate is? Like you said, it was just under 200 approximately.
The last calculation I saw was $197.13.
Okay. Very, very specific.
It's a tax rate.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Grilke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know we've talked about this before, but it doesn't seem to capture in the bylaw that the CCBA is responsible for the collection. And that's my only concern about this, and it has been for a while, is that neighbors are having to collect from neighbors. And so I don't know how to change that. It's just a concern, and I'd hope that maybe we could find an alternative but the only alternative is, I'm assuming, we collect it.
So, Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Grilke, I don't want to create the impression that people don't pay through the city. They do pay us, and they, you know, we would only go back to the board to find a collection method if we're not seeing payments in a timely manner. So the board gets involved with talking to their members at that point in time. So you could do it as neighboring businesses collecting from neighboring businesses, but in reality, it's a board they've elected to run their
Right.
association that's collecting.
Mhm. It's still a little bit sticky for me, but it is what it is for now until they maybe broach that concern. I shouldn't worry too much about it, I guess. There's been no concern brought up from the CCBA, or has there been, counselors? Oh, there has. So, I mean, I don't know that it's changeable to date, but it definitely would be a concern with these times that we're going to be facing in the next months and years, with businesses in trouble and not able to reopen and finances are tough. I don't think it's fair to put that on neighboring businesses, but barring any other, I don't have a valid suggestion on how to fix it.
So, Mr. Mayor, I guess
just-
one thing I would offer is that the city is by courtesy already doing the billing. So the cost of the assessment is being charged to the city, as well as the logistics of doing the billing. So the city is already providing a service, in relation to this.
Maybe the comment would be here, it's no different than condo associations and different groups that, pay condo fees, etc. I don't think, where different groups decide to collect money on their behalf, we shouldn't be moving into a situation where the city becomes accountable for that, because then we're starting to have general taxpayers' money subsidize groups that choose to collect money for their own particular purpose. And we would get criticized for that on the other side of the ledger. This method has been used for many years in many different municipalities to support business associations, and generally works pretty well.
Okay.
Kate, thank you very much.
Okay.
Councilor Grilke, I didn't want to cut you off. Did you have anything else?
No, I mean, I appreciate that it's how it's done. I just wanted to, I guess, reiterate the concern. And if there was a different way we could try to do things, that would be great. And if the CCBA has some other suggestions, I'm open to them. And I guess for now, it is what it is.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilor Roth, did you want to speak? Councilor Roth, have a question? No? Okay. Thought I saw that on. Anybody else have any questions? Councilor McKenzie.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to administration. I guess I'm just a little bit confused, and to further Councillor Grilke's comment, because like before, yeah, it was just a set rate per business. And I guess my concern, or what I'm not understanding is what happens if we end up with another 30 vacant buildings where the businesses are no longer there after COVID, let's say. Does that mean the current businesses will end up paying more then? I'm not understanding, sorry.
Sorry.
To help this, the reality is the city's already written the check, right? Back in January. I think if for some reason ultimately $31,000 were collected, we're not going to be chasing the additional $1,000. If there's an issue in terms of before this process repeats next year, the association will have a bit of a sense about whether it's got a problem or not, and I'm sure we'll approach the city if it's concerned about the dollars that it's collecting on or not collecting. The bottom line is that at some point there's a conversation amongst the business community around a joint set of expenditures, and then they set up the framework to pay for that. I think the city's pretty open to whatever method you want to use, as long as it's open and it's transferable and there's clearly no cross-subsidization from the general tax base.
So,
okay,
Mr. Mayor,
and thank you for that clarity. I guess I didn't understand that I thought this was moving forward as to how we were going for future years too. So I did misunderstand that. Sorry, Ms. Frosted, were you going to say something?
I was just going to clarify that the previous rate of $200 was determined in exactly the same method. It just actually happened to be an even number, but it was a tax rate, the same as this year's calculation.
Okay, and then I guess my last question is, and I'll be completely open. I am definitely a culprit of this, but I have been open with the business association for the last few years. My business does fall within this area, and but I have two businesses, and the one business subleases. So when you're looking at it based on the tax roll, then is the city able to then give me two bills, or am I only still getting one? Ironically, as a business, I'd like to pay two because I have two businesses that are part of the Downtown Business Association.
So, Mr. Mayor, I would have to check this with the tax department. I'm not certain exactly how they treat the sublease properties. I think that we basically go by the ownership of the building. So.
Okay, and I guess then, yeah, maybe moving forward, maybe this is something that the actual business association truly needs to look forward for the future years. But thank you for this.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the motion. Okay, thank you very much. That was for second reading, so let's motion for third reading, please. Councillor Stevenson.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that third reading be given to bylaw C-1115-20 2020 Business Improvement Area Tax Rate Bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much. Nothing to add. I'll call a question on the motion for third reading. Okay, that's been carried. Thank you very much. Okay, moving forward into the industrial area, we have a bylaw that we need to do. Could I get a motion? Would like to, Councillor Roth.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move second reading to bylaw C-111920, Industrial Water Main Borrowing Bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Lavoisier. Mrs. Frostad, you're handling this one? Okay, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Mr. Mayor, this is a borrowing bylaw that was approved in the 20 to 22 corporate plan in relation to an industrial water main project. It is to be funded 2.1 million through a debenture and 1.44 million through Municipal Sustainability Initiative. And the reasoning for that is the MSI funds are being used for the road work portion. Okay. And the borrowing is a utility funded borrowing bylaw.
Okay. Very good. This project, just a very quick question. So the project on the road work, I guess that's all part of it, but would that be handled in next year's budget when they cap it over, or after they do the work, or is this because all the underground work has to be done first, and then we usually do the road work capping later? So,
Mr. Mayor, it's my understanding that the entire project is being handled through this $4 million. I believe the timing of the project is to be this year. I'm not aware of a carry forward, but Mr. Lavoisier might be more familiar with that.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's a series of projects that have to be completed within the industrial area, and this is one of the worst areas. Similar to the storm projects that have been identified, they will be completed within phases of work. I don't have the exact particulars in front of me for this project, but there is some MSI that is being used to help fund this. So that leads me to believe that there is some surface improvement work that is going along with the underground.
Okay, very good. Is this, just a quick question, is this part of our ask for funding for capital projects, or is this different totally?
This
Through
is,
you-
go on.
Go ahead.
This is different.
Okay.
This was already in the budget.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Acker, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since we have Mr. Lavaseur on, I was going to ask a question. I see we're replacing some old water infrastructure, water main and surface from the 1970s. This replacement, what's the life cycle or lifetime for this new replacement? Are we going to buy another, 50 years, or is this 20 years?
That's an excellent question, Councillor Acker. The PVC pipe has been around for a while, but that being said, there isn't a lot out there that's reached its end of life. And so you hear about 50-year timeframes is what I'm kind of hearing. But
So similar to what we had in the 70s, we should buy another 50 years moving forward.
there you go.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, any other further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the motion. Okay, thank you very much. That's been carried. Okay, information items. We already have that on our consent agenda. Councillor Acker, did you?
Mr. Mayor, I think we have third reading on
Okay.
as well.
I'm sorry. We have. I stand corrected. Third reading. Could I get a motion for third reading? Councillor Acker, you had your hand up.
Sure, Mr. Mayor, I'll move that third reading be given to bylaw C-1119-20 industrial water main borrowing bylaw.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. This was just discussed recently. Any other further questions or comments in regards to borrowing bylaw? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the motion. Okay, thank you very much. That's been carried. All right. 12A is consent agenda. That is our information items. And I'll just entertain one more motion for this evening to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Motion to adjourn. I'll call the question on the motion. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for the presentations this evening. And I want to give a bit of a shout out to staff, Simon. I think your staff did a remarkable job on a lot of the presentations this evening. You were very well versed on it, and council had a lot of questions that were answered very well. So on behalf of all of us, thank you for the work. So long.
Thank you very much. We'll pass that on.
Okay, thanks. So long. Good night.